Hi, my name is Amanda Rodriguez, and I am the Executive Director of Turnaround. Welcome to the 5th week of our 7 weeks of giving. I am thrilled to have all of you joining us today that are here live, and then all of you that are on our Facebook Live. Today is especially important to me this week. It is our shelter week. So last week we were talking about Helpline, which is a critical function of our crisis response. But the next step in that process is ensuring that all survivors have access to a safe place to lay their head so that they can start to plan and are empowered to make decisions that are best for their future. And at Turnaround, our crisis response model includes a shelter response that, in my opinion, is like no other. I'm so proud of the team that does this work, and I can say that when I started at Turnaround, actually when I was in between the one job and the next job, I called a survivor who I'd worked with when I was a prosecutor, and I remember the words that she said to me. She said that when she was recovered from a trafficking situation, she said the only options I had were to go home, where I was being abused, or to go into a homeless shelter. She said that is unacceptable, do better. And so I think at Turnaround, we have done that, and that's because of the amazing work of our staff and the amazing dedication of our survivors to continue to see themselves walking forward on this path towards a journey of healing. So I'm really proud to have all of you here tonight, and I really appreciate all of the community that has shown up to continue to support our mission here at Turnaround. I want to thank our sponsors. So Merit Companies is the 7-week sponsor. They sponsor every single week. I want to thank Fremont Mortgage. You're going to hear more about an incredible competition that we are running starting this week, launching this week, where all of our realtor friends, we're going to call you out so that you can start supporting our shelter week. There's no greater connection than those that are selling homes with those that are also looking for a shelter for themselves. And I also want to thank the Village of Cross Keys, where we had our 3 o'clock event today, who also sponsored this week. So it is a really important week to me, and I really appreciate, again, that continued support for the mission of Turnaround. I'm now going to turn to our first speaker this evening, Senator Chris West. I actually remember the first time I met Senator West. I went into his office to talk about a bill that I was working on, and I remember talking about human trafficking to you, Senator West, and I remember the words that you said. It was something along the lines of, I can't believe that that actually happens, especially in Baltimore County. And Senator West heard me out and was the only Republican that signed on to the bill as a co-sponsor, which I greatly appreciate. And so I appreciate your leadership on that, and I am so thrilled to have you here tonight, so I'll turn it over to you.
Great. It's great to be here. I guess I can take this off up here. I'm not sure he's on the program, but we have with us the Baltimore County State's Attorney, Scott Shawan, who Amanda used to work for, and who I work very closely with down in Annapolis on bills relating to policing especially. Scott is a terrific partner. I will add, I'm a Republican, Scott's a Democrat. It makes no difference. We work together very well. I'll say the same thing. Michele Guyton is going to come up in a minute. She's a Democrat. She's in my district. Michele and I work together really well. So in Baltimore County, we have a tradition of working across the aisle in a bipartisan way. So it's great to be here tonight. I met Amanda a couple of years ago when we talked about the traffic, but I really got to know her a couple of months ago when I took a tour of the facility down on LaSalle Drive and learned much more about the organization. So for those of you who aren't totally familiar with it, let me just give you a little bit of information. Turnaround was founded in 1978. Amanda is the executive director. Tom Strong of Venable Law Firm is the president of the board. It works on intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and sex trafficking. 40% of their cases are intimate partner violence, 30% are sexual violence, and the final 10% are trafficking cases. It works with all the survivors of these situations through compassion, counseling, and education, and in particular therapeutic services. The facility on LaSalle Drive, most of the offices offices where the door can be closed and therapeutic services can be provided to the survivors. Of special interest to me as a lawyer, free legal consultation is available through this organization, and they do a lot of free legal consultation each year. So in terms of how much work they do each year, in 2019 they had over 1,500 hotline calls and nearly 600 trauma therapist engagements. Last year, it went up to 2,000 hotline calls and nearly 800 trauma therapist engagements, and they render comprehensive services to about 3,000 people each year. So it's a really important organization. Of paramount importance today, the emergency shelter for those leaving dangerous situations is very important, both for victims and their children. My wife was the head of the board some years ago of an organization in Baltimore City called Baltimore Outreach Services that operates out of the basement of Christ Lutheran Church down in the Inner Harbor, which provides shelter for women and children getting out of abusive situations. And this isn't just overnight shelter. This tends to be long-term shelter. So I know an awful lot about the need for these sorts of services to people, both in Baltimore City and in Baltimore County. And let me just conclude by saying, you may remember the old commercials on television, the Morocco commercials. They had this guy saying, I saw the product and I liked the product so much, I bought the company. Do you remember that? Those commercials? Well, when I took the tour of Turnaround's facility on Los Alamos Drive a couple of weeks ago, I liked it so much. I'm not going to buy the company, but I decided to make a personal contribution. So, Amanda, if you'd come forward, I've got my own check for $500 that I want to give to Turnaround. Sure. And that's it.
I am now absolutely honored to introduce Delegate Michele Guyton. Delegate Guyton and I were just meeting tonight, but interestingly, and I think our Deputy Director Rachel Tsai will also recognize this connection. Oh, I always forget to Delegate Guyton worked on a project and she and I crossed paths and didn't even know it, which I think is hilarious. So there was a project that I worked on while I was at the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention that looked at empowering our schools to identify child victims of trafficking and connected all the pieces to make sure those children were advocated for. And I left and wanted to see that continue on, and we actually heard about that through the Regional Navigator Program that both Rachel and I are working on here in Baltimore County. And we've been working with Dr. Michael Ford here in Baltimore County, who also worked on that project. And so he was so excited to get it started again. And I'm just thrilled that you are so passionate about that project. The connection that you made there is so special to me because it shows such a particular understanding of issues around survivorhood and also the importance of advocating for survivors in all age groups and all demographics. So I really appreciate your passion for this issue, and I'm very honored to have you here this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with all of you. I've had a chance to meet most of you in this room, and so I recognize that you're not really just here for information to learn about Turnaround, and I want to speak to you more as colleagues, because that is what you are with me, and just so that I may not be as highly elevated in this field as you are right now. But I wasn't sure what to talk about here, because as Amanda just said, and as I'm going to tell you, I can experience in every one of the things that all the issues that touch the life of your clients, right? And I want to start by saying that I know words are very powerful and people bristle at certain words, but I am going to use the word victim when I talk to you. I'm going to tell you that I know that you don't want me to do that, right? And that survivor is the more appropriate way to deal with trauma and to talk to people in a therapeutic way. So whenever I talk to someone who is an actual survivor of any sort of abuse, that is how I would refer to them, to give them agency, to take the onus off of the abuser and onto the person. So I recognize that. But the reason that I want to use those two terms is they're not interchangeable to me, right? I have worked on going way, 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 way back, right? I've worked on suicide crisis lines, starting back in you're gonna know how old I am, 1989, right? I worked in domestic violence shelters in Iowa and developed policy for the women and children there so that they could move, and this is the point, from being victims to being survivors. It doesn't always happen overnight, and to be honest, you and I both know it doesn't always happen. Not everyone who experiences abuse survives, right? What you do, what we all do as advocates and activists, and what we can do as policymakers, that's what closes that gap and helps them evolve from victimization to true survivorship, right? And I want to be a part of that. You need that help. This is where my heart lies. So I'm going to tell you that one way that I did that this year, a very small way, is that we had a situation, a constituent called me up and said that her daughter, who was 15 years old at the time, had been sexually molested at her first workplace, some gun, right? And that she did what we tell our kids always to do, right? What do you tell them to do? Go to the police. Right? She did that. She did that by herself at 15 years old and walked into a police precinct to report what had happened to her. To find out that she had to do that, yelling through a plexiglass barrier in a public space, describing her assault, right? So I did some research on that and found out that that is, in fact, the way that we do things, and that was, in fact, the way that we did things in Maryland, right? And put in the bill, along with my cross-file in the Senate, Senator Shelley Huddleman, who most of you probably know from her amazing work in this area, in all of these different areas. It's so simple. All it said is that you have to offer somebody who's reporting something of a sensitive nature, a personal nature, a private room to do so, right? That was not a requirement until, I believe it went into effect October 1st, right? Such a simple thing that can help somebody move from feeling like they're a victim and being re-victimized, right, in that situation, to having true ownership of their survivorship, right? Going down the path of having dignity, having privacy, and not being traumatized. So that's just a simple example. I do want to talk a little bit about sexual assault, because that's something that I have done a lot of work on. Back in, talk about me being old, and now you're really going to get it. Most of you are younger than I am, and you may not realize that we didn't always have cell phones, right? So both my husband and I, back in the early 90s, had these little black boxes on our bedside tables that would beep at you, always in the dead of night. Like the pagers, I think, were always, emergencies always happened in the middle of the night, right? When they beeped at us, one of us was going to the ER. He was going because he was a surgical resident, somebody was in a car accident or, a gunshot wound. And I was going to meet, and I'm going to use the term victim, the victim of sexual assault. Working through, this was in Iowa City, Iowa. It's a terrific sexual assault program there, even then, but especially now. And I was going to teach him or her that they should put their clothes in a plastic bag, right? They need to put them in a paper bag. I was going to tell them that no matter how disgusting and dirty they felt, they could not take a shower, right? And I was going to explain the process of collecting evidence and hold their hands while they went through it, if that's what they wanted, right? All of those things are important services. So the next part of the bill that I just told you we passed this year is going to be to require those sort of services to every person who reports a sexual assault in the state of Maryland. So that ties it all together. But I also want to say one last thing about that work, and I would love to talk about all of these things. But and that is the hardest part of my job then was the fact that I was on call because I was a child psychologist for all the child sexual abuse cases. Because they thought I could handle it. My mom's sitting back here, and she knows I can't handle it, right? Nobody should be able to handle it, ever, right? So I held it together most of the time until I got in my car, right? You've all probably been there, right? And sometimes I didn't, right? But I did understand the importance of that support and the trauma that is associated with those kinds of experiences, not just having them, but the way that they're approached after they happen. And that's why the work that you do is so, so, so important. So if there's one thing I can say to you is I know how hard it is. I'm gonna cry just talking about 25 years ago. But it's so important, so thank you for doing it. I I want you to know that I am here if you need me. I didn't bring you a check today, but I certainly want to be involved in your work.
I am very happy to now introduce Sherelle Peterson. Sherelle is our manager for crisis response services at Turnaround. And when I started at Turnaround, Sherelle was our legal advocate. We all saw so much in Sherelle. She is not just a dedicated staff person, she's dedicated to our community in a way that it not just surprises you, but it inspires you as a leader in this agency. She is a leader at our agency. Sherelle took over just as COVID hit, and her position went from running a physical shelter to running a hotel-based shelter to losing the physical shelter and then running a completely remote helpline staff. And she did so with grace and poise and professionalism in a way that I think few of us could ever expect or even call on ourselves to do. It was an incredibly difficult position to be in, and Sherelle did so with losing very few staff members. In fact, I think her staff may be the longest standing. She really has been able to manage that staff in an incredible way. She has continued not just to, and this is a story that I'll tell just pieces of it. When we started doing the hoteling services as the way that we transitioned to ensure that survivors had shelter services during COVID, we only had one hotel that was available to us. That was how Turnaround had always provided these services. And Sherelle instantly kind of realized this was not going to work because there were times that the hotel was either not available or when that hotel was not the right place for that survivor. So Sherelle took it upon herself to find not one, not two, but I think 5 hotels, including hotels out of county, to make sure that survivors always had the right place to go, so that there was never a question about where they would lay their head, that their children would always have a safe place. We have served more survivors, not just 1 or 2 more, thousands more survivors during COVID than we've ever served before, and that is under Sherelle's leadership. So Sherelle, you are amazing. We are thankful to have you, and I am very honored to introduce you.
Good evening, everyone. As Amanda said, my name is Sherelle Peterson, and I'm the Crisis Response Program Manager for Turnaround, and I supervise the Crisis Response team. One of the services we provide that we'd like to highlight today is our emergency shelter program. We provide emergency shelter services to survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. Emergency shelter is offered to survivors that are screened for lethality and high danger. Lethality and high danger means that a survivor is facing probable death or serious harm or injury at the hands of their abuser. Emergency shelter services offer survivors an immediate and safe option. There is no alternative to keep them safe from further harm or abuse. We offer these safe options through our partnerships, including hotel partnerships, the Family Crisis Center, Center for Hope, and other victim service providers and programs in the community. We are thankful to have these partnerships because we all have a common goal, the safety of survivors. Emergency shelter not only supports survivors, but also their children that are seeing abuse firsthand every day. To give you an idea of how vital emergency shelter services are, over the past year, Turnaround has provided emergency shelter services to 200 survivors and 80 children. We have provided over 1,000 safe bed nights during this time at no cost to the survivor. Receiving shelter services also include the provisions of food, clothing, toiletries, new cell phones, supplies for children, and transportation. You cannot imagine what a survivor is going through when they are at serious risk, but we see this every day. Until the day that a survivor can be free from harm, violence, and abuse, we will make sure that emergency shelter is an option for them. We are asking you to connect with us to make sure that each survivor can be safe. Everyone can do just one thing. Tell one person, make one phone call, one social media post, letting your friends know about turnaround and how to support survivors in our emergency shelter services. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherelle. That was wonderful. I'm Jean Henningsen. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Turnaround. Thank you to everyone, to Senator West, to Delegate Guyton, and of course to our sponsors for coming out tonight, and to all the staff who are here. I wanted to let everyone know about a special competition, fundraising competition that we're starting for realtors. So if you or anybody you know, and anybody watching at home is a realtor, you have a chance to win some really, really cool prizes donated by Fremont Mortgage Group. It's called the Safe at Home with Turnaround competition. If you donate $200 to Turnaround for every home you close between now and register between now and the end of November, you can win. First prize is a skybox at Camden Yards for a 2022 Orioles game with tickets for up to 18 people. Parking passes and food and beverage will be provided. Second prize is 4 great seats at your home plate during next Orioles season. So we know that there are some realtors who have supported Turnaround and others who would probably like to get in on this competition. Go to our website, turnaroundinc.org. Follow us on social media to learn more about how you can register and support our survivors finding safe shelter as well.